So this is part 2 of stories of Dona Antonia. As I was driving away, the constable was still there, and unfortunately that was a bust. So I hope everything ends up being okay. There was somebody that was cuffed, but anyway. We have a great sheriff's and constables department here. My dad has actually been the constable for... He wishes he were the constable. But he was the sheriff at the camp in Brazil. But he was a chaplain for... And whenever he can, he will still do some work for the sheriff's department, constable's department in Magnolia. But Mom said, I'm doing an aside, then I'll come back. Mom said one day she was at a stoplight, and Dad would ride in the cars with the officers, and so he'd hear great stories, and then he'd hear these stories that were pretty heavy, and spent a lot of time ministering to them. But one day she drove by and was going through a red light. She said their dad was sitting in the front of the police car with the policeman beaming. He was all happy that he was in the police car. But the sheriff and the constable's department really do love my father. I've always thought of him as Clark Kent, somewhere between Clark Kent, John Wayne, the first Indiana Jones that I knew, the real one who went into the virgin forest and built the camp. You know what, maybe I'm going to make this one about my dad. And we'll get back to Dona Antonia at some point. I don't recall if I had said this not long ago, because I have recorded some of these, and I go ahead and delete them if they're too, I want them to be a certain length. I'm trying to make them 3 to 5 minutes, but they're ending up around 7. I do recall my first memory was going to Brazil at 20 months with my dad. The memory that I shared about seeing the big picture window, the Edwards to our right. And I have funny stories on Mom, but those will be another time. I loved it when my dad picked me up and held me. Now, I knew I wasn't going to be as tall as him, but I thought, wow, it's so great to see the world from this vantage point. My mom she actually was 5'6" when she went to college. She grew another inch while she was in college, which was very interesting. I think the body still grows until you're 25, and ears, nose, and I don't know what else grows until you leave this earth. So anyway, I hope mine stops growing. I'm okay with it. I'm fine. I recall, and this is in the book that I put together when my dad had built the camp. There was a rocking chair in our first house, and I remember him sitting me on his knee. I think it was his left knee, because I recall looking over my right shoulder at him, and he said, "Do you know what a camp is?" And I said, "No." I don't know how old I was, 3 maybe. I had no clue. He said, "Well, it's a place that kids can go and have fun and learn about God." And that's about all I remember about that conversation. What I remember, though, it was somewhere in the evening, and we had those old Venetian blinds that were about this thick, and it had the canvas holders, whatever those are called, and the little... No, they didn't have those rods. I'm sorry. Those were new technology in the 70s, 80s. Back then, you had to actually, adjust the blinds by, it was like manning a sailboat, making sure. And of course, half the time they were crooked, or if they fell off, you had to buy a new set of blinds, because there was no way you were untangling those blinds. And the light was showing through those blinds just perfectly. I remember the smell of the furniture we had. I think it was made of teak, which most Scandinavian furniture was. mid-century modern furniture was made of that teak. And so it just had this wonderful aroma. We had a corner fireplace that had river rock. That's from living in San Antonio. Anyway, it we'll talk about the river walk another day, but it did have river rock, and it was varnished. It was absolutely gorgeous, and we hung our stockings every year. Now, another memory I recall, we went shopping for land. I remember going to the Word of Life camp, and I had a swimming pool and flowers. And I remember thinking, I want a swimming pool and flowers. And when I read the letters that my dad had written to his mother about the camp, back when I was sort of putting this little, I wanted to put something bigger together, but it ended up being kind of a booklet of memories. But anyway, one of the letters that he wrote, his mother said, Denise wants a swimming pool and flowers. So I hope one day that you're able to have a pool. And, you know, I would exchange. I wouldn't put any more flowers at the camp unless you add more of those tropical flowers. They had orchids and birds of paradise. The purple and white orchids would grow off the trees. And just gorgeous, you know, flowers here tucked away here and there, wildflowers. And but the land was completely raw. They considered it virgin forest, and that's why he was my first Indiana Jones. Is he would go work in these, later he wore shorts, but he had these canvas pants, and typically I think it was a button-down shirt, kind of like a tennis shirt, short sleeve, sometimes a t-shirt, but typically it was tucked in with a belt. I mean, it looked kind of snazzy for going out roughing it. He did look like Indiana Jones. I think he even had the hat at one time. He definitely did later, and he does now. And there's a picture of him with a machete, one of the machetes that you have at the end of the pole, and he's cutting down bamboo. That's where he really looks like Indiana Jones. Actually, he looks like Clark Kent a la Indiana Jones. Great teacher. Wonderful planner, an architect major, so he was able to take that, even though he later changed to Bible and Greek, he was able to take that and use that to design the rudimentary sketch of the camp, because he had gone and scouted the topography, the land, the formation, and this piece of land had you know, it was in a valley. And so the girls' cabins were on one hill and the boys' cabins on another, which was cool because you could do SOS at night, all kinds of fun stuff. And there was a natural spring, and he worked with the architect that built Word of Life Camp, Dr. Valfredo Tomé. I don't know what Valfredo is English. The last name would be Thomas, maybe. And Word of Life was the evangelical Baptist camp that a lot of our friends from Paca went to. And so when we would come back to school, you know, and actually it was in the spring, because when you're south of the border, our fall is their spring, vice versa, and the same for winter and summer. So, and our last house we built, Dr. Valfredo Tomé had built that, and Dad had sort of done a rudimentary drawing, and Valfredo Tomé took that and knew what he was doing. And we had this wonderful home the last year and maybe 2 years that we were there. I can't remember. I don't think it was quite 2 years that we were there. So those are some memories of Dad. I'm going to stop because I'm already way over, and we'll put a comma here. Take care. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.